Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Everlasting Veteran Podcast. I'm joined again with Amanda Williams. We're actually live now, and we're hopefully everybody can be able to jump in, maybe throw a comment, and we can respond to some questions. We got a lot to cover today, and I appreciate your continued service, from one veteran to another, and welcome back. Quick reset from the last time. What's changed? What's going on now with you?
Well, so I just had my 44th birthday, which is crazy. I really can't even, I'm still confused about being 44 in the way that, I work with a 22 and a 23-year-old in my direct office in recruiting. And so we were just spending some time reflecting, because they were asking me hey, what have you learned in, your time basically on Earth and in the military. And I think that when you're serving, I was telling them, my specialist or my E4 to E5 time I felt like the longest season ever, where I was I'm never going to get anywhere. I'm stuck. And in that season, I spent so much time, where I'm am I even supposed to be here? What are we doing? And so somewhere, going from E4 to E5 and then now 22 years later and a chaplain captain, it's been just a funny journey. And somehow you go from one of the youngest soldiers in the room to then being one of the most tenured. And I don't know how it happens, but I can tell you that when you're doing it well and it's fun, which the last 10 years has been just amazing, it becomes not a job anymore. And so that happened this week. And then additionally, yesterday we did a birthday 5K. And the birthday 5K was to benefit Miss Veteran America. So I had some friends and family come out and we ran and walked and raised awareness. We look like little crazy people with red, white, and blue. I told everybody to wear red, white, and blue, and had headbands available. We had flags, and I had a table set up with the QR code, and we were talking to whoever wanted to listen as well about just the service part. So we had a really great time. I may do another one before this Miss Veteran America season is up, because we had a lot of people interested, but there was a lot of events happening in my area yesterday. So I think that it could have had more attendance if it were not for so many other competing events. But right now I'm just in the brainstorming of what other events would people want to attend, because a big part of the Miss Veteran America is the innovation and the advocacy of Miss Veteran America. And so trying to figure out how do you advocate in different ways. So I'm looking at places to do a happy hour or a cigar night. I've got my normal Memorial Day events and my normal May events coming up. So I'll be doing Heroes Night Out, which is a big deal here. It's a nonprofit that works with military members as well as first responders. So they have a Memorial Day picnic, which I'm really looking forward to going to. And they have resources for veterans, male, female. They have family events. And so I've loved watching them grow in the past 5 years that I've partnered with them. So I'll be praying over their picnic, they call it, and they have barbecue, because we're in Texas and you got to have barbecue.
Yeah.
And then the city of Round Rock, which I'm next to, they always have a beautiful Memorial Day event. And so the past 5 years, I've done the Memorial and the Veteran Day veterans ceremonies. And so I'll be praying over those. And that's what I've got for May. And And then I'm going to a H2F symposium, not to like do anything besides to be a participant, but I'm very looking forward to it because the holistic health is definitely, in my opinion, one of the best things that the military has begun. And so I'll be doing that in Virginia a couple weeks from now. So really looking forward to attending. And also I'm working on getting certified to be able to teach H2F, which is holistic health. And it looks at the whole health, which is super important, like health and fitness and spiritual, sleep health, all those things. And I think that in order for us to be well-rounded and to take good care of ourselves, that's something we should consider. And so I think that it's amazing that the military has gotten there where we are considering whole health, not just go do PT.
Yeah, absolutely. And, before we dive a little bit more into the 5K and Miss Veteran America and stuff, down in Texas, you guys do it bigger, right? That's what
We
they
do.
say. And
Go hard or go home.
Yeah, what does community look like for you? When you're serving, you're not just serving in the military and in the Texas National Guard, but you're out there in the community. And what does that look like for you? Serving your community, being there for others, and what's that environment like down in Texas with, you guys got great barbecue, you guys easy to get together, and stuff like that. And it seems like people come out in swarms, especially when you get the good barbecue. Everybody loves food, and that's kind of the communicative way of connecting.
Yeah, so funny you say that about the barbecue is because one organization that I partner with a lot is a Texas Fallen Project, which I'm trying to think of how many years. I think it's been about 6 years that I've been their honorary chaplain. And so I actually did the wedding for them, which was a surprise wedding 4 years ago. Time flies, 4 years. And then I did another nonprofit wedding on Valentine's Day. Both had great barbecue. And so at this point, my daughter says, like, if she tastes barbecue that is not Bobby's, who is the main guy from Texas Fallen, she's not happy with the barbecue. So we went to a big barbecue event and she tasted some barbecue and she's like, this is okay, but it doesn't taste like Bobby's. So funny about barbecue is 1 year, it was like right when I began this chaplain journey, I prayed over 13 events and all of them had barbecue at it. So yes, we're all about barbecue. I serve with the Texas Fallen Project, which has been great. I never know what they're going to have me do. They actually did the Austin Rodeo this year, and they did it last year to raise money for kids' college fund through the barbecue, everybody who does the Austin Rodeo. And so I go and pray over that, which was awesome. And then I'm very involved in my church. I attend Summit Worship Center. And so I help lead the new member service, which we call CORE, which just gets people set up, explaining exactly what is our church about, what's the foundation of the church. And then the second part of that is learning the gifts that each person has, because it's super important that you serve within your gift. I think sometimes we look at other people's gifts and we're like, well, I really wish I could have that gift. And really, truly, it's like you may have a gift that I don't have, and I have a gift that you don't have. And so when we're looking at any kind of service, whether it's in the military or in a church setting, wherever we're at, we should always be serving within our gift set, because it's not something that God gave to us as a blanket packet. We're like, hey, this is what you get. No, everybody gets something different. So yeah, so I'm doing the core group. I do the announcements at church, which has been fun. It's been a good growing opportunity because as this is live, the announcements are live. And so you have to be pretty prepared in order to do that. We've been prepping for a women's conference, which is next weekend. And that's been I think it's been like an 8-month process. So really looking forward to what God's going to do with these ladies next weekend. And so, yes, I'm serving in a lot of different capacities. The way that I do life is most of the time I say yes if someone has something for me to serve. as we talked about before we got started a little bit, not everywhere that you go, you're supposed to serve there. And so these last 2 years, one of the things that God's placed in my heart is that it's okay to say no, and that there can be really good opportunities, but just because they're really good opportunities, they aren't really good opportunities for you. So.
Yeah. And, you talk about gifts and stuff like that. And, a little bit of the translation is, in utilizing, your Clifton strengths, right? And your understanding of yourself a little bit more, and understanding where you can apply yourself and its best fit to work with others, and that's part of that transitional piece as well. When service members are transitioning out of the military, what have you seen, being in the Texas National Guard, what people are struggling with most with that transitional piece and trying to, fit back into the civilian world?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been considering a lot, because this has been retirement season where I've went to several retirements. I've gotten to follow up with people who have retired in this last year. And so the biggest thing when people are prepping for retirement, and obviously I have not done it, so it's not from personal, it's just from conversations that I've had and just seeing what has been successful and what's not, is one of the things is like, what is the desire of your heart? Like if you do not have to work anymore because you do have a full retirement from the military and probably some VA disability, you could actually do something that you enjoy. Like whether it's beekeeping or, you're doing some kind of a craft, you're extending your mind in a way that you've never known to do before, or just something as simple as, hey, I've seen a lot of people running businesses, which is amazing to me. I think the one thing I would say is make sure that you do something. None of the things that you do, you're going to fail at unless you don't try. What concerns me always is if you don't make a plan. And I've seen people do that where it's like, I'll talk to them and like, hey, so what's your plan for retirement? Because I know that they're 6 months out. And they'll say, I'm just going to sit on the couch.
Couch surf.
So that's cool, right? Do that for, I'd say, a top of 90 days, right? After that, you better go find something to do. So make a plan, maybe put that in your plan of for the next 90 days, I'm going to travel, I'm going to couch surf, whatever, you're going to chill. But then what are you going to do after that? Is there a school desire that you have that you haven't gotten to do before? Is there a place that you've wanted to see? Like start making those plans, because that keeps your mind active and it keeps you engaged because you've always had a purpose in the military. And the biggest thing that we need in life is a continued purpose. And so whatever we're doing, we have to continue to have a purpose doing it. Otherwise, that's where we become hopeless. And so that's always my concern as people transition out is, hey, what does your community look like? Like who is walking alongside you and what is your plan for the future? And if you don't have one, as you start to leave, you need to think about what that is. Like what resources do you have?
Well, the dog wants to be part of the star of the show.
Yes, my apologies. I have
no worries.
Too many dogs. Yeah, so that's another thing we do for the community is dogs.
Yeah. One of the key points you did point out, is that purpose piece, and one of the trainings that I've had over time is focusing on, Gallup's, elements of well-being. And career and purpose, is one of those things where, you may be retired, you may be later on in your life, and you're not looking to work, but purpose, fills that hole, that gap, that feeling of not having that connection, not having a drive, not having a focus. And that's crucial, because, within elements of well-being, career equals, also financial, which also equals type of community potentially and social, et cetera, all the elements of well-being. But purpose is one of those drivers that a lot of people, we lose. And this isn't just the military.
Yeah,
right?
That's true. Very
And
much.
Gallup's studies on the elements of well-being are so well done that people lose their identity and they lose their purpose because one, people don't realize you can leave a job and you can actually be grieving, right? In a sense, and literally grieving that part of your life has closed and you don't know how to move forward without it. because it was your identity. It was who you are, and,
Mhm.
a lot of times people go, well, that's my job. That's what I do. It's not who I am. Right. But
Mhm.
they don't take the time to actually figure out who they are, who they see themselves as. Right. And so that
Mhm.
purpose, that identity is such a huge thing, especially in the veteran community, but it happens all over the place. It doesn't matter who you are. Because
Mhm.
when you don't, grieve the loss of a job, maybe you were fired, maybe you were let go, maybe your contract ended, whatever the case may be, when you don't grieve that properly and be able to move forward, right? You lose part of who you are,
Mhm.
but who are you going to be now? Right? That's the next
Yeah.
question. What now? Right?
Yep.
And finding that new path forward, what does it mean to you? Right? Is the
Mhm.
biggest thing. Not the exterior noise trying to tell you who you are and who you should be,
Yeah.
right? Everybody has a moral compass. Everybody has, what they feel inside their heart of what's good for them, what's good for their family. And that's the drive that kind of gives the foundation for purpose, right?
Mhm.
You feel
Yeah.
good about it. You
Mhm.
know, one of the things for me when I transitioned out, it was a good extended period of time. Yeah, I went into another career after leaving service, but it was like, okay, this is what I do, right?
Mhm.
There is an identity with it, putting on another uniform, going from the military policing, right?
Yeah.
And then, having another job transition almost 2 years ago, but it really took, a lot of time for me to sit down and go, what means the most to me,
Yeah.
right? What do I identify myself, right, as in this world, right, is purposeful to me, not
Mhm.
because somebody told me I'm doing a good job, not because somebody told me this is for you, right? You hear that a
Yeah.
lot. This
Yeah.
is your calling, right?
Mhm.
This is
Yeah.
your calling. Just because you're good at it doesn't mean it's your calling, right?
That is
You
true.
know, and that's, I think, where people get that misconception and they still feel lost along the way because they're still trying to figure out that missing piece, right?
Mhm.
The other side to it as well, I find, is people get in this mindset of once I get to here, everything's going to be fine. The
Yeah.
rest of my life is going to be, and you stop that growth mindset,
Yeah.
right? Of there's not a next chapter, right? And
Mhm.
next chapters are good because it shows growth, right?
Yeah.
So even if you're in, I see a lot of times there'll be like a 2 year period in a different job, another 2 year period or 5 year period or whatever.
Yep.
And they're like, I just can't find something because society has put it in. Well, if you don't stay there for 20 years and you don't collect the retirement or you don't collect
Yeah.
this, it's this common misconception of you can set yourself up for retirement without being at one company for 20 years. Yes,
Yeah.
you can, the benefits of it, but at the same time, do the benefits at the end of a 20-year career at anything outweigh your mental health and not knowing like who you are and what you want to do and your purpose? Like if you hate
Mhm.
your job, like why are you staying? You
Yeah.
know? And I feel like that happens a lot because you're never going to be able to reach the caliber of what the military service does,
Mhm.
right? That high level of purposely filled, driven, meaningful day in and day out, the day to day of serving in National Guard, active duty, whatever, that feeling just can't be topped. So we're constantly on that search and it
Yeah.
feels like we're never going to find it again. But like you said, getting involved in your community, right? And if you focus on, like I said, the elements of well being, the community and social side to it, that is a huge thing getting out of the military is because of that connection,
Yep.
you know? So
Yeah.
what do you you haven't transitioned out yet,
Correct.
but for somebody that's still in, you
Mhm.
know, what does finding your path mean to you, right? And what do you think some of the steps would be if you had to talk to yourself 5 years from now and say you're getting out in 5 years? What are some of the things you would say to yourself now that the 5 year from now you would listen to?
Well, considering that I did change my path pretty drastically, one, going from enlisted to commission, but also to become a chaplain and to completely close off my civilian career, which I did auto damage for 15 years for Geico. And so as you're talking about that transition, it's like there's some parts of you that will always belong with that previous, whatever the position is. So like, for example, auto damage, right? I can't turn off the writing estimates in my head. So everywhere I go, I'm looking at cars and I'm writing an estimate and like determining, the cost of the repairs, if they did a good job, the dings, the dents, like the imperfections in the repairs, and then just considering, the industry. And so I do miss the industry. And so I think that it's okay to miss what you used to do, whether it's the military or a civilian job. And it's okay to mourn those things, as well as it's okay to do something new, because going into the chaplaincy realm first part-time, and then immediately after that, God called me into it full-time. I will say that it's okay to be a little bit nervous or scared, because that's where growth happens. And so looking at what is going to serve you, but also serve the Lord in the best of your capacity, is what's going to direct your next chapter, whether it's how your next chapter of the military is, or as you transition, like finding something fulfilling. A lot of the active duty have the opportunity to be able to start looking for that position like a year out, right? And they start to be able to try out different positions, and they consider that, or they volunteer in those things. They were having a work source type of you get to work the last 6 months in a job that you desired. I don't know if they're currently doing it. It sounded like it had started to phase out, but either way, it's like starting to figure out, hey, what do I desire? And also praying on it, because there's nothing that we should be doing without spending some time in prayer and meditation and really contemplating what is the Lord's desire, because we can have all the desires that we want, but that doesn't mean it's the path that we're supposed to be on. And so as we start to do things, if doors are opening and it's just amazing, right, then we know, okay, we're going in the right direction. But if we start to go and all the doors are closing and we just keep hitting dead ends, it's a potential that what we thought we were supposed to do, we weren't supposed to do. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. And so I think the biggest thing is like giving ourselves grace, no matter if it's a military transition or a civilian transition, of going, okay, like maybe this isn't what I was supposed to do, and getting the opportunity to change our mind, because you can change your mind and you can be somebody else in a different career path as many times as you want until you're dead. Is you'll see people who get their education, their bachelor's at 80, and so it's like one of those reminders that we're never too old to learn. And so just encouraging people to continue to learn no matter what phase of life that they're in.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one of those things I was looking at too, because I went back to school and I took the daunting task of finishing this new degree in under 12 months. And I got 8 classes left. I tested out of like pretty much everything. And, to get that piece of paper, and, it's a stamp of approval. Mm-hmm. We grew up in a time where society pushed really hard that, if you don't go to college, you're not going to amount to anything type of thing. Yep. Which is, I don't think the best approach. And I think a lot of companies are starting to realize that work experience, mm-hmm. and tapping into individuals that understand their abilities and how they can fit into the company. And it's why a lot of, civilian sector jobs, are starting with the approach of, Clifton Strengths. They can't do it for hiring, but, taking those, and like you'll see on applications, knowledge of Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma, all that kind mm-hmm. of stuff. People need to realize, especially with like leadership training in the military, that Six Sigma stuff is a translatable thing to put on like your resume and stuff. The leadership mm-hmm. training you get in the military is by far like still top tier, of application. But one of the things I realized too is a lot of companies are starting to switch from, associates. It's kind of, I feel like, starting to fade out a lot, but you get like, bachelor's or relevant experience. right? Because they're
Mm-hmm.
starting to understand that, okay, you can go to school and you can pass these classes, you can get this degree, but if you don't know how to apply it because you don't have experience in doing
Yeah.
so, what good is it? Right. So there is a good balance. I'm not saying don't go to school, but
Yeah.
there's a good balance. And when it's right in your life to accomplish, what you want to accomplish,
Mm-hmm.
go for it,
Yeah.
go for it. It was the right time for me. Go back to school, go into a different degree field,
Mm-hmm.
business, and especially with everything that I do and how my mind works and having a better understanding of who I am
Mm-hmm.
and how I can apply that and be more effective.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that they'll go to school, see this all the time, especially young 18-year-olds, and you got to pick your career right away,
Yeah.
right? And then you
Mm-hmm.
get this degree, and you're like, a lot of them don't end up in the field that they went to school for, you know?
Correct. Yep.
So that goes along those lines of like that identity, that purpose, and everything else.
Yep.
So let's,
That's how I have an MBA, because the whole plan had been I was going to be a director for Geico, right? So I have an MBA and now I have a Master of Divinity.
yeah,
And I went through a whole 2-year mentoring program with Geico to go to the next level. And then in the middle of that's when God was like, no, we're going a different direction. So yeah, I think that it's the most important thing to realize that we can change our minds and God might change our minds for us. So,
yeah. Yeah, opportunities can be created, but also at the end of the day, you got in order to seize opportunities, you have to also create them too.
mhm,
And putting the work in on yourself is just as important as anything else. You
mhm,
know, we talked about it last episode, being 100% for you to be 100% for others.
yep,
And so that kind of let's dive into a little bit of update. Final salute, Miss
mhm,
Veteran America. What's an update you got going on? You got it's semifinals June 12th to the 13th.
yeah.
Um,
So it's going to be a very wild, like I mentioned, May's pretty, I've got some things, but June's actually going to be really jam packed because I'm going to go right from annual training, which is the 2-week little phase,
yep.
right the next day to flying to Florida, to Tampa, Florida for the semifinals. And so the first part is in-person interview, just so that they can know how much you know or you care about advocating for women veterans, and also what do you know about their organization, what's your purpose essentially, and if you're going to be a good fit for their program, because the next would be the final round, which is in October. And then the other part of semifinals is lip singing, which that part I'm actually like slightly more nervous, I think, because I've never lip synced before. I have a song chosen. I'm trying to figure out like how do we put it together so that it will be worthy of a show. But all of these things is just in front of the judging panel. It's not like a live. You won't be able to unfortunately see my lip singing unless maybe they do some highlight reels. I think there's some highlights of some stuff that they liked. So I'm going to sing CeCe Wayans' Believe for It, which I don't know if you've heard that song, but it's basically, you'll have to listen to it later. But it's my favorite song, and it has a lot of meaning to me about my life because it just talks about how like the faith that you have will move mountains, and continuing to believe for it even when you can't see it. And so the job that I'm in for the military right now did not exist prior to me applying for it. It didn't even have a job post. Like there wasn't anyone else that did this job in the Guard. And so the job was created through prayer and a question. And so with that, I was praying for 4 years to get the job that I have. And for at least 4 months, I was praying every day and I was listening to this Believe for It song. And so I had shared it with my prayer group, and the song and also the purpose of what I was praying for before I got the job. And so the job post actually came up in March of 2024. And I was accepting the job in February in prayer group in my friend's house. And so there's a picture of me just receiving the job in an armchair, just like, hey, you got it. The job is there, with no job post even there yet. And then I actually got the job and started the job in April on my birthday. And so recently just celebrated 2 years of being a chaplain recruiter for the Texas Army National Guard. And so the song has a lot of meaning to me, just because I do believe that faith can move mountains, and that no matter what we're doing, we have to believe for it, right? Like, we can't go into it haphazardly. If we do, then we're just doing ourselves a disservice. I was reading a devotional the other day, and one of the things I think we do very poorly as a human is we'll pray for something, and then we immediately dismiss what we prayed for. So we'll say, like, God, I know you're going to do this, but then you're like, you start doubting what you just prayed for. So we have to pray, but then dismiss the doubt. Like, we can't pray for something and then go, but it might not happen, because then you're taking the faith part out of the equation. So that's going to be the semifinals. And then October is the finals. The top 20 women veterans in the semifinals will go to the finals. And that's also in Tampa. So praying on that, believing for the finals. I have a couple of friends that have already bought their tickets. So they're believing for it more than I'm believing for it, because they already bought their plane tickets. So, and that will be in person where people can see it. So far, they don't give you a fundraising amount that you need to raise, but a big part of it is advocacy. And then the other part is fundraising, since it does go into Final Salute to help with the 3 nonprofit programs that they have, which is Home, Safe, and Next Uniform. And so far I'm at about $4,000 of fundraising that I've done, which I've been doing it on both Facebook, Instagram, and Spot Fund. And then, like, my aunt sent me a check, and a guy at the lake yesterday gave me $20. So it's been a really funny fundraising experience all together with that. So yeah, I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. So I got a loaded question. I'm gonna go off of what we kind of discussed, because I think it's important. Belief.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in this world that are afraid to speak that they believe in something. And I think it holds people back, because you get a lot of people that they will pray when times are tough.
Yep.
They will pray when it is the last resort, it seems. And they'll bring it up when they got nothing else.
Yep.
What would you say to individuals that are constantly, feel like they have to hold back from belief? And how can they move forward without feeling held back and feel freed?
Well, I think it goes a little deeper than just the belief itself, because when we have a relationship with Jesus and with the Lord, then it's not so much of a task that we do, because I grew up for a long time with the mindset that we just had to pray. So it's like, you're praying before a meal, you're praying before dinner, and it has to be in a certain way. And so when you are doing it in a religious manner, meaning this is the tradition that you've grown up in, which a lot of us grew up with a certain tradition, then it's less about the relationship. And so when you get into the relationship where it's like you're seeking the Lord in all things and you're celebrating with him the wins, because that's the part where then you lose a little bit of that afraid that takes you away from belief. That, and as you continue to believe, what happens is that you get to see those things that you believed in come into fruition. And when they come into fruition, it's this amazing gift, because then you can see what you believed for happened. And so then it's like a token for an advance belief, because you're like, okay, I believe for it, it happened. Maybe this believing thing works, or this faith thing works. But if we never believe for it, it's really, really hard, because we can't get to the next level of trusting and believing, knowing, hey, like, I believe for it and he's done it this time, he's going to do it again. There's a sign back here that says, it's talking about, says, I still remember the days I prayed for the things that I have now. And so when we pray for things and we receive it, we have to remember also that God's not a genie, right? Because it's like, that's when you say, hey, I only pray for like hard times, which is a lot of people. It's like, I only show up to church for hard times. I only pray for hard times. And then he gives it to us and we're like, cool, I'm going to put you back on the shelf. God's not a genie. He wants to hear about the good, the bad. Like he wants to hear everything. And even when you're not telling him, he already knows. So it's just like invite him in each and every occasion. And it makes life so much easier because then it's like, it's more of a best friend relationship and I'm not saying it like to downplay who God is, right? Because God is a big, big God. He's so big that we can't even fathom his powers. But with that being said, the relationship should be so intimate that you're comfortable coming to him with all things. And then the belief part is so much easier in that capacity because you're like, hey, you haven't done me wrong yet. And sometimes like Satan will creep in and be like, well, what if this, what if that, what if this? And so when you're getting that, and this is something I talked to my soldiers about last week, is making sure that we know how to dismiss it. And the way we can dismiss those fears and those concerns is really getting into scripture and rereading the things that God did say about us and remembering how he's created us. And when we do those things, it makes it a lot easier because we just can continue to combat it. Because that's like life is spiritual warfare every day, right? So it's like we wake up, it could be peaceful, happy, like we're having a great time. And then all of a sudden it's like you get this attack. And so recognizing the attacks and then having the warfare to realize like, oh my goodness, this is an attack. Like, what are we going to do? And praying into it and then looking up scriptures, even maybe having one like as a sticky note somewhere on your desk, if it's something that's happening a lot where you're like, hey, God says I am fearfully and wonderfully made. He's already done these things for me, so that we already have it as a reminder, because sometimes we need to see it, like, and not just opening our Bible, but like right in our face, like, hello, this is what he already said. This is what he's already done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's one of those points that, individuals, along our journey, including myself, that, we have gotten to a point where not allowing society to dictate to us how we believe, how we participate, how we form the relationship, etc. I think that it is crucial that individuals take the time for you and nobody else, because, like you said, that relationship you have is for you, and outside noise is what creates, and I feel it holds people back. So let's get into a little bit. How did the 5K go? I know we talked about it a little bit, but what stood out the most to you, when you're in attendance and everybody was there? And I know that there was other events going on, but how'd it go and what stood out the most to you in that moment?
I think just the community aspect, because I had some of my best friends there and their kids, and it's just the all levels just there together is always such an amazing thing, because it's like a couple of us ran, a couple of us walked. We had some babies that were toddling. And so just that opportunity to be able to come together was just amazing to me, and just the people showing up, right? And then contemplating it. And so it's like, Army wise, we always look at what we did well and what we could do better. And so probably for the what I could do better next time, because this is the after action review, is to make sure that we plan it a little bit more. Like, fortunately, I had my one friend, he became the bodyguard of the table, because a couple days before I realized I had no volunteers. So like I have things on the table. So I've got fruit, I've got the SKU signs so that if you wanted to donate, you could. I had all of the American flags and stuff, and then we're all going to go. Right. And so my friend Matt had said, oh yeah, I'll come. And I was like, cool. Would you like to be my bodyguard? So he showed up, and that was helpful. So like making sure that you have a couple people that can man a table if you're going to have a table, because I was just like on faith, like if somebody came by, if they wanted something, they could just have it, because I'm not going to be there to guard it, right? Because I'm going to participate too. And then figuring out how to broadcast better, which is something that like is in the works, because it's like 5K was a good experience, like a soft opener, but looking at like, okay, if I'm going to do, a cigar night at a local place, or if I'm going to do a happy hour or something, like how do I get it out there so that people want to attend? Because if you don't have them attend, then it's not really helpful, right? So I think that was the biggest thing that I learned from it, was just hey, like how do you broadcast better? That, and the timing was weird because 5K wise, like Texas has been crazy with rain and then not rain. And so where we had it was this beautiful lake, but the lake has been low. So it's just like there's a lot of, when you get into anything fitness wise, especially outdoors, considering the fact that, hey, it could get rained out. Thank God it did not. We had beautiful weather, perfect weather, sunshine and rainbows. So weather was great. Community was great. Got to see everybody from an 8-month-old baby not running in a stroller all the way to, like a couple other people that it was just amazing. And then I ran into a National Guard guy, friend of mine, and he just happened to be in the lake, and I was like, hey, you want to run with us? So just bringing in the community very organically as we go. And so I think the location was amazing. I think the idea was great. I would just probably amp it up a little bit more. And that goes back to like the time, right? Just, I haven't had as much amp up time as I would like, or as much sewing time as I would like. So,
yeah. Yeah. And, there's a lot of 5Ks that go on, and that's, goes back to also like, getting involved in the community, life after service, right? Finding a purpose, finding your community, finding that social aspect, and those are key components as well. You may not run or walk, but you may be able to find something that, finds, meaning to you, to be able to participate, help out and support and stuff like that. And it's great to be able to see that you had good support for that. Are there some components, anybody that is looking to organize or organizing 5Ks or any tough rocks, stuff like that? Is there any key components that you would say, hey, pay attention to this? This can, improve your event or anything like that?
I would say the big thing is that advertising, right? Is like using all of the different resources to advertise. And then also following up or like checking in with people, because I really didn't check in as much as I should have to like amp it up until like this last week. And so just learning from that of like, hey, because I've done spiritual resilience walks and stuff with soldiers, but it's always been more of like, hey, we're going over here. Y'all are coming. Like it's like a mandatory fun event. And so it's different when it's a volunteer participation. So making sure that you're continuing to be active in whatever event that you're planning. Right. And I think that's big, because I'm good at organizing things, but the follow through this last time was a little lacking, in my opinion. It's like, so the table was set up good. I had the thought of like, hey, we need snacks. We need the fundraising links. We need, which I laminated because I knew it was going to potentially rain. And then taped everything down because the wind is so, like, the thinking about what is the architecture of, or like the location, and then being more proactive on getting a couple of volunteers to man a table or something. And then like, how do you get other people within the community to participate in whatever it is? So another thing that I'm looking at, like fitness wise, is I am a big gym head. I don't know if you know that, but big gym head. So I go to a gym every morning at 4:45, and they have a big outdoor football field length. And so I was thinking about talking to them about having like a boot camp style workout and having that be a fundraiser. So,
yep. What's your dog's name?
So that dog is Phoebe. All of my dogs are rescue dogs, and Phoebe was a foster fail. She is. I have 2 girls and 1 boy. One came to me after my deployment, was the neighbor's dog, and they just decided he was a better fit for my house than theirs. So he lives here now. They visit sometimes. And then the second dog, well, I had a couple fosters that got adopted. I've got a good friend of mine that I met from city of Round Rock. She helps with the veteran events. And so she has her own nonprofit, which is called Paulist Rescue. And she does rescues. And so I got Phoebe by way of her in another rescue. And then my daughter fell in love with her, so she stayed. And then I got a third dog. So the third...
All right. 3 dogs.
So the third dog was was supposed to be a weekend foster. And like 2 days, right? Like he's going to show up for 2 days. Somebody else had an allocated foster. He's going to hang out and he's going to go. Well, that was September 11th of, it's going to be 2 years on September 11th because I actually got him the night before I did the September 11th 5K. So trending.
What kind of dog is Phoebe?
Phoebe is a street dog. We don't know exactly what she is. She looks like a little bit like a...
Can we see Phoebe? Can we see Phoebe?
Phoebe, come here.
I mean, she's trying to steal the show. I'd love to be able to see Phoebe if she comes over. And I know the viewers would love to.
She's currently chewing on a toy, but I can probably get her to come over here. Azul, come here. Come here. Let's see. This is the biggest of the babies. Come here. Come here. Oh. This is Azul.
Oh,
hey, Azul.
Look at that pup.
Yeah, Azul. He's camera shy a little bit.
Yeah, not like Phoebe. Phoebe just wants to be mysterious in the background.
Yeah,
so be part of the show.
Phoebe's currently chewing up a dog toy because that's a favorite thing to do. And then Pilot, which is the foster, he's currently outside having an adventure at the moment because we have to circulate dogs here. So anyway, so everybody's got their own things. And yes, of my random community things that I've found to do has been dog ministry at this point of fostering dogs and helping fosters, because I've done a little bit of volunteering. Like we did a puppy yoga event where the puppies, I hadn't done that before. So have you been to puppy yoga before?
No, we got yoga up at Veterans Rally Point, and some of the community wellness canines with the police departments, they have done dog yoga before. Yeah. So we're looking to introduce that at some point and see what, that, because my mind immediately goes to watching videos of goats. And, goats are funny, and I want goats, and I want particularly the fainting goats because I don't know. I find the videos to be quite funny. Yeah. But they said, and they can, they've trained them to be able to actually do like the downward dog pose and stuff like that. So, and then crawl around while you're doing the dog yoga. So there's a thing with, canines and stuff that allows us, and I've tried to figure out and find research, because oxytocin is the chemical that we release when we pet animals, we pet particularly dogs. Yeah. Right. But that's the same medication that they give dogs when they're in labor. And so I'm like, there's got to be some connection. We're releasing that chemical. Yeah. The dogs get it when they're in labor. There's got to be some type of connection. Yeah. Those happy hormones that we release when we do stuff that we love doing. But yeah, I absolutely love the whole canine aspect. I think it's a huge wellness tool. And even if you have just a dog at home, just obedience, a family dog, stuff like that, I think that goes into the wellness piece that veterans, they know it works. They know that, it's one of those things of that companionness. There's more than just a pet, and they're a family member, they're a friend unconditionally. And that's what I love about dogs. Yeah, the service dog has been an amazing, not that I have one, but I have a couple friends that have service dogs for different reasons. And I think that that's such a powerful tool, whether it's one that can, have you seen the ones that they're able to like remind them that their blood sugar is low? Oh yeah. So stuff like that, but it's also super helpful for PTSD.
And so with these little crazies that I have, they are just helpful because they're chaotic. But as you've heard, they're not the quietest. So like if I'm trying to work from home or something, it's not the greatest. And they're all quirky because I think when you come from like where Phoebe came, she came from underneath a house in South Austin. And so she has some like random quirks about her where it's like, if she hears a weird noise, she's like hiding and scared. And then Azul, the one that's next to me right now, he has some anxiety, so he has to like see where I'm at. And so dogs are a lot like people in the way that they have their little quirks and you have to learn them. So anyways,
yeah, we can do a whole episode on dogs. I'll tell you that right now.
We could, yes.
I almost brought, I have a lab and a Frenchie, but she's come down when I've been down in the studio and done some work and stuff, never on an episode, but she'll jump in the chair next to me because I have 3 chairs here at the table. And she'll jump in the chair next to me and actually lay down and all of a sudden like start snoring. And I'm like, thank God I'm not recording right now.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, you know, she's like this big and she is loud. Like, I'm like, put a CPAP on that dog, you know?
Yeah. But it's okay that mine decided they wanted to spotlight your show. Yours.
Hey, Phoebe wanted to be part of the show. Now everybody knows, you know, Phoebe is a star.
She is.
Yeah. So let's get back to it. So Final Salute, we touched base on it. Let's dive a little bit deeper. So there's the home and the safe, right?
Yeah.
What is it? Why is it important? Let's start with home with Final Salute, because people want to be able to understand, you know, your involvement with Final Salute and what you're doing with Miss Veteran America and why it's important to be able to find out more information and the resources that they have.
So I was looking actually at like what was the impact because we always want to know the percentage or how many, right? And so there's actually been 8,000 women and children served overall across all of the programs that Final Salute has, which is a pretty significant number. This is their 15th year of Miss Veteran America, but they had started the Final Salute a little bit before then. So with that 8,000, that goes into the numbers of the home, the Final Salute, and the next uniform. Home in itself is based out of Virginia, and it has a group more like a transitional house that people can stay in, women and their children. If you go to the Final Salute website, you can actually see someone's personal story and see a tour of the house, which is pretty cool. I did that earlier just because I was like, okay, let's see what they do. So you could be in the program for up to 2 years, which means that you can live in the home. They will feed you. They'll help you with education, resume building, transportation to be able to get to where you need to go, and just prepare you for the next chapter. Because the thing that's a little bit different, and I've tried to help, I had a woman veteran, I think it was 5 years ago, in a battered relationship in the middle of some serious relational abuse. And the problem is there's not a lot of homeless shelters for women. Mm-hmm. And with the shelters, sometimes they're mixed. Like I had looked at getting into a nonprofit and they didn't have any resources for women. And the reason was because they didn't want to they didn't want to put them in together, which I agree. Not the best idea to put women and men in the same housing experience, especially if they're facing things like substance abuse or homelessness, because you're already vulnerable. And now you're taking 2 vulnerable people and you're bringing them together. So what's going to happen is like there's going to be some hookups or some adventures that, you know, is not desirable for them in that season. And so with these homes, it's just women and their children. There is no men involved in this home program. And so that's primarily in Virginia, but additionally with the SAFE program, which is something that I think can really change, both of them can change lives, right? But SAFE you can use anywhere in the United States. And with the SAFE program, it can be assistance for a bill needing to be paid, right? So, but it can't be the internet. It has to be something that's crucial. Paying your mortgage, paying your rent, paying your power. Because you think about what is the impact of paying that one bill and getting them to be able to continue to stay in their house. Then they're no longer having the facing of homelessness because they got through that month. You have to have served and have a DD 214. So that's super important in order to be able to engage in these programs, both of them. And then the other program, which is the Next Uniform, that helps provide clothing and resources in order for women to get into the job market, right? Because a lot of times, like I went to a one that was here. It wasn't from Final Salute, but it was a women's Veteran Day at one of these job fair, like job resources places here in Texas. And what they did was they helped us get a cover picture so that we had our picture that we could start looking for resume building. They helped us put a uniform, like not a uniform, a business suit on, right? Help you like go from business. You've got your uniform and you go into your business attire. And sometimes women just need that another woman to walk alongside them. And so that's essentially what the Next Uniform does. And I think that there's similar resources throughout the United States that do those sort of things. But this is where if you donate or you're looking at the funding of Miss Veteran America, it goes into Final Salute, which then houses those three programs, which has helped over 8,000 women year to date. So it's a pretty amazing thing. A big thing about the participation is a lot of these women are single moms, which I identify with because I have been a single mom since my daughter was 18 months and my son was 3 years. And I can see how, like, if you don't have a foundation built for yourself, like maybe you were having your husband do the majority of things and you're just walking alongside him, and then you lose that situation changes, how big of a change that can cause in your life and how you could face homelessness or face like a major issue in life. And so I think that looking at those resources is very important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing the work that they're doing, you
Yes.
know, and, you know, you incorporating into what you're doing with Miss Veteran America and, you know, going through this and, you know, everybody can go check out Final Salute, the link below, you know, to find out more information. And, you know, if you want to be able to help contribute and you find interest in it, you can go to Amanda's Facebook and IG handle is the same as well. And, you know, the work that you, advocacy that you're doing in support, you know, with Miss Veteran America. Is there something that you don't do? Because, yeah, I mean, you've covered so many spectrums, you know, from in service to civilian sector to, you know, dogs and everything else. You know, I mean, I did not expect us to go down this road.
Of the dogs.
I didn't even know that about you. I learned something new today, right? You're fostering dogs too. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's a testament to who you are. And I hope that shines through in the competition for Miss Veteran America, because, you know, you are a bright and shining light for so many people, including the animals of your community as well, to be able to, you know, give them home. You know,
that continue to run a spotlight. No, I can't really think of what I don't do, but as we talked about, like through text, one of the things that God has been placing on my heart is that Jesus rested, and that not everything that we do or what everybody wants us to do is for us to do. And so as I'm being invited, because I get a lot of invitations for service, which I love, right? Like I love all of the ideas. I had a church reach out to me. Well, two churches during my annual training time that they wanted me to come and speak, which I think is amazing. But one of the things that I did in the past was try to figure out, how do I be two places at one time? And sometimes we can do it, right? Sometimes we can, but doesn't mean we're necessarily supposed to do it. And so one of the scriptures that one of the things I've been looking at with Jesus is that Jesus rested. Jesus did not heal all people, and he did not go 24/7. He took the time to rest. He took the time to reset, and he also went away. All right. And so if we think that we're not worthy of rest, if Jesus was worthy of rest, we are also worthy of rest. So I had, before this, I was just looking at scripture, and these I shared with some of my soldiers. It says in Luke 5:16, it says, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. So in the midst of all of the things that we do, it's super easy to get burnt out. And I can have seasons where I can feel that I might be on the cusp of that, which is why when it's like looking back at the 5K and going, okay, like, could I have done more? Yes, potentially, but I also have to rest. And so we can only do what our capacity is available to do. And resting can be the most crucial thing that we can possibly do. So I had a cub, which is, the commander's update brief on Wednesday night. It was at 7, it was 6 to 7, 7:15. I was done at the call. 8:30, I was in bed, because sometimes even if we choose not to rest, God is going to shut you down where you have to rest. And so resting, stepping away, getting those times where you spend time alone, because when we are serving in the capacity that I serve, where everywhere I go, like yesterday I went to the Poppy Fest. I'm running into people everywhere knowing me, right? Because I am a pretty known person. And so even when you're out in society, you're going to run into people, and you have to be at your best behavior, ready to talk, all the things that you should do as a servant, right? So with that, taking that time to withdraw and spend time with just yourself, or in my case, my plethora of dogs that run around my house and my family, but getting into that rest, and then resting in the middle of chaos. So as I mentioned earlier, like with shutting down, sometimes God is going to shut your brain down and just be like, okay, it's resting time. And anybody in the military knows that we can sleep anywhere. And Jesus also could sleep anywhere. And so in Mark 4:38, it says, Jesus was in the stern sleeping on a cushion. And a lot of people cannot fathom how you would sleep in the middle of a storm until, if you've been deployed, you're like, yeah, that's cool. Like, as long as the bomb's not going off right by my head, I'm good. Let's sleep. And so that would be the capacity of where I got to with deployment, is like, if you're working 24/7, having that time to shut down and going, okay, like, I recognize this is a sleeping time. So resting, because everything at sometimes is going to feel urgent, but it's not all urgent, and we have to rest.
Yeah. It's so true. And that, that rest period and creating those boundaries is so crucial to be able to, refill our gas tank. Right.
Yep.
And a lot of people, I've had conversation with them. We'll take our car down to get maintenance done. Right. So often than not, we forget to do the maintenance for ourselves.
Yep.
Right. Part of that, and it varies depending on who you are. Right. And part of that, sometimes it's reeling back and having a moment for yourself. Sometimes it's taking a break, taking a week. I had to do it a lot with this show, and it's life balance, right? It's not what works for everybody else, right? And not what works for the show, right? Because I don't have this, big producer be like, hey, put that up on the screen,
Yeah, you are a one-man show.
I'm a one-man show. That's why I love. Shout out to my buddy Scott Fryer. We launched Big Blue Confidential here. I actually get to be that guy in the background, right? Awesome. I get to be that guy to, hey, fact check that for me. No problem. I also get to be that guy that chimes in and just be like, you're wrong. And nobody sees me on camera, right? And I get to have fun with it, because at the end of the day, I'm doing what I love, but at the same time, I'm taking a rest from, like, kind of being this mixologist right here of doing the show, lining up guests, everything else, especially when I first started. And it takes time, right? It takes time. It takes a drain.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I can't imagine the amount of time just getting your video that you have now that starts the show, like that took time figuring out how you wanted to do it, like building the studio you have behind you. making sure that it's closed out so you don't have the chaos that I have. Because where I'm sitting, I don't know if you know where I'm sitting, but I'm sitting actually, it used to be my eat-in kitchen. So it's off of the side of the kitchen. So it's like the eat-in space, but it became my office during COVID, which is why it looks office-like, but it's not.
The breakfast office nook.
That is where I'm at. Yes. And that is the reason why, the chaos. And so I think like, I'm super proud of what you've done. It's been awesome to watch the growth that you've had with it. And also the way that there's like, this is your creative outlet. So when we talk, that's why I was asking you specifically, like, hey, can you talk about your transition? Because this is one of the things that I think you did for healing for yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, and I love the fact that you threw a question because a lot of times that doesn't happen, and by design, I like having guests on and they're the star of the show. They get their message out to be able to do that. One of the things that I've learned over time of podcasting is that, one, yes, I'm hearing my voice. It's a processing thing. But at the same time, finding something that it's not a matter if you're good at it, or you're great at it, whatever, but it's a passion of being able to create connection. Right. And I knew that, for many years, I was striving to create that connection in a different way, create that connection for others, right? Where they'll be able to talk about what they're doing. They'll be able to talk about, purpose that they have. They'll be able to talk through it. Right. And, it became this like kind of one-on-one peer support, in conversations. And I never wanted to have a show. My first episode, I didn't have any video. It was only audio. It was the soundboard, my laptop, and I was creating the first episode. I took like 100 takes. I typed it out. I read it word for word. I wanted to make sure it was perfect. Because the concept of, comparison to other shows and everything else, you don't see the behind the scenes. So you don't know what goes into making that episode.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of trial by error, learn as I go. But I'll tell you that first episode, it made me learn that I never want to do it like that again. It came out great. But I learned that I never want to do that again because the most important, powerful piece to all of this and what I do is the conversation and connection piece. And, through that, there's a healing aspect, right? There's a healing aspect of understanding of others, and not comparing myself to the Joe Rogans, the Sean Ryans, the everything else and what they do. And they add value and they have a production team and they do a great job and they have great guests. But one of the big things for this is providing a space where other veterans locally, especially, can come in and they can be creative. They can find an outlet, however long or short they want it to be. Right. And, this model, I want to continue it, as it continues to grow. And I want to have that model, be in a different space other than, just my house. Right. Yeah. And two parts to it. Cause this has become like the bunker. I'm down in my basement. Right. And I have 500 square feet of my basement, a little less than half. And I created this space when I closed the doors, and everything else. I have French doors down here and everything else. And you get lost in this space. You forget where you're at. And I live here. Right.
Yeah. I love that.
And that's the point of it. Right. You're coming down. I got a putting green over there. So like when I'm in a creative mind space or creative block, I'll go over, I'll pick up a putter, I don't chip it because I'll end up putting it into the wall or something. But, just a little bit of everything down here allows me to escape. It allows me to ignite that other side of my brain that otherwise there's distractions, and I always felt like I needed to find like a space that I can create those creative juices. I can decompress, I can find, reflection, right? That was a huge thing on my journey of growth. And I'm still growing, of continuing to remember to reflect. I go back once in a while and I'll watch, bits and pieces of episodes. And to this day, I have a podcast, but I don't listen to podcasts. It's this thing for me
Yeah.
that I do it because there's a purpose behind it for me, right?
Uh-huh.
And I don't sit there, and a lot of people, they'll go on their drives to work or, do stuff around the house and they listen to
Mhm.
podcasts. But for me, I don't know. I never got into listening to podcasts, just like listening to books on tape, right?
Okay.
Kind of outdated myself there saying on tape, but
Uh-huh.
but it's true. It's
The
it's one of
Audible
those,
now.
yeah, Audible now. It's one of those things. The same thing when I wrote my book. This is my camo. I wrote down a title in 2017, one of my darkest times, and I'm like, this means something to me, right? This
Mhm.
is my camo. It's a veteran, me, camouflaging who I am, trying to fit back into society, right?
Yeah.
That's the meaning I had behind it when I wrote it down. And it took a while. It took till like 2000, end of 2019, beginning of 2020 that I wrote like a chapter. And then it wasn't until the beginning of 2024 that I actually started writing more intensely and then finished the book in December of 2024, or excuse me, 2025. And, it wasn't really until I started refocusing and reflecting on what I was going through, what I had
Mhm.
gone through, and looking back on life's growth that I've had for myself,
Yeah.
be to be that best version for me,
Mhm.
because I so often than not was like, what version do people want?
Yeah.
Right. And when you get into that mindset, it's a slippery slope because you're trying to please others and you're not creating those boundaries that you
Yeah.
need to create, to be able to take that proper time, like you said, to rest.
Mhm.
But those boundaries are so crucial and important. It's
Yep.
hard especially in your line of service, any type of line of service to others, to say no,
Mhm.
right? And
Yep.
because you always want to please and be there as support, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's just not in the fuel tank, right? To be able
It's
to
true.
be there 100%.
Well, and it's not just a fuel tank thing. Sometimes you're not called to be the person that's
Right.
walking alongside them. So, or there's like a end date to the season that you're with them. So sometimes it's like we can be in a season walking alongside someone, taking care of them, helping them, providing them resources, but we're not supposed to be there forever, right? Because they have to eventually. You can sit there and try to drag somebody. Like the idea of, I was telling somebody the other day with a PT test. I don't know if you've watched anyone where you're like watching them fail the run on the PT test, and all that you desire more than anything is to get a rope and just carry them along. And so I
Mhm.
think that that's a lot of times when we're trying to make people be better, is that we're trying to get that virtual rope and drag them along, but they have to get up on their own. We can
Yeah.
provide them all of the resources, we can provide them prayer, we can walk alongside them, but they have to want to be better. And so it's not just that we might be tired, it's sometimes that like they aren't desiring to do better, and God's like, all right, the end date is now. Like this relationship has expired, this season is closing. And so we have to recognize when seasons close, and that we don't then try to continue in stuff that God doesn't want us to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the big things too with creating boundaries. One thing I learned over time is I start off with saying, "Are you willing to put in the work for yourself?"
It's
You
a good
know,
one.
because there was a point in time that and I didn't admit it. I wasn't willing to put in the work for myself. I
Hmm.
wanted to get there, but I didn't know how,
Yeah.
and it seemed like this daunting task of this, uphill because there's a lot of unanswered questions,
Hmm.
right? And it's not a matter of, taking a leap of faith in a figurative stance or anything like that. It's a matter of sitting down and reflecting where you came from, where you're at, and where you want to go.
Yeah.
And, I took a lot of time and I would sit out in my backyard, sit under the gazebo in my backyard to, have a fire, and I would sit there by myself sometimes, burn the boxes, take time, it's a simple, sometimes it's, 45 seconds, sometimes
Hmm.
it's an hour, however long I need to reflect. And I'd look around and I go, man, and I just did this earlier today. and I'll sit here and I was doing some work on my computer and I'm like, man, this came out really good. You're like, and it's been like 2 years since I built, almost 2 years since I built the studio. Actually, it's been 2 years. And I look around, my first thought is, what can I improve? And I
Yeah.
go, and I go,
It's very
when
human.
it was done, I was like, this is perfect. Right. And that striving for perfection, concept,
Yeah.
limits growth. And I'm a firm believer in that. When you strive for perfection, you limit the growth in what you can have. And because nothing's going to be perfect if you're in that mindset of, having that growth mindset. And I
Correct.
sat there and I go, you know what? I need more people, right? This, the walls, the foundation's there, you know? And, I said to myself today in the boardroom conversation that I have, and I'm like, I need to drive more people to the mic, you
Yeah.
know? I need to, allow people to seize the opportunity when the opportunity is created. And, one of the things that I love doing is having conversation,
Yeah.
and finding more about somebody, seeing the light bulb go off when they find more about themselves, right? Because then you're like kind of talking through it, and the stuff that lives rent free in your head no longer is living rent free, and
Yeah.
it's paying the taxes, so
Amen.
yeah, I mean, it's concepts in life that I've learned over the years that people say it when they go to the gym, it's time to pay the rent, and it's stuff like that. It's a mindset a lot of the times, and in getting through those barriers that we create for ourselves more often than not,
Yeah.
because we're not afraid of the judgment from others. We're afraid on how we're going to judge ourselves when we hear that noise, right?
Yeah.
And I
That's
think
really
that's
true.
the scariest thing sometimes for people. And I was at that point one time too, and I think creating the opportunity, or at least creating the space for somebody to create the opportunity for themselves, is even more powerful.
Absolutely. Because then they're having the opportunity to grow, because we can only open the door for the growth. We
Yeah.
can't make somebody grow. It's like trying to pick somebody up. They have to want to get up.
Yeah.
So I think
Well,
that creating the space is amazing.
yeah. Sometimes too, these metaphors, I think we went into this conversation. We won't go too deep. But the meanings of metaphors and where they go.
hmm
And, if you get in the mindset of looking at, you have 5 doors in front of you, right? Our job as individuals of support is not opening the door, because that's the first step for somebody to, when opportunity exists, right?
Yeah.
Each door says opportunity on it, right?
hmm
If I open that door, I'm taking that opportunity, right? In a
Yeah.
metaphorical sense. A lot of times I see people, you know, I talk to them and I say, hey, listen, this work you put in, you're going to know when you're ready.
Yeah. That's very true.
Because when you're pushed by somebody else that's at a certain level, for instance, if you have the training, if you've gotten through your hard times, if you're at a certain level that you're in a mentor sense, you have to reflect and remind yourself that you need to know where that person's at.
Yeah.
And because if you push them when they're not ready, right, they're going to retreat when it becomes hard,
Yep.
because it's not at their pace.
That is very, very true. That's a lot of times what like the discipleship, either failure or success, looks like. Because I was talking to a girlfriend of mine that I probably walked alongside her to get her to go to church. She doesn't even go to my church. She goes to a different church, but to get her going back to church. And it probably took a good 4 years. And so she asked me the other day, because she was frustrated, because now it's like she's trying to lead people to the Lord. She's trying to lead people back to church. And so she was like, how were you so patient with me for so long? Because I think sometimes we get so confused, because it's like, hey, I have the tool. I'm going to give you the tool. I'm going to give it to you right now. You're going to have the tool. Okay, cool. Like, and that's sometimes whether it's, I've got the job for you, I've got the resources for you, I have the church for you, whatever it is, or even fitness. Like, hey, I'm going to come over because I've done meal plans for people. I've sat down with them, done their meal plans for them. But if I make you a meal plan and you never use the meal plan, then there was no success. And so with her, I walked alongside her for over 4 years, and I did it in a way of like just seed planting. And that's how we get them to open the door for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, like I just read a couple scriptures a couple minutes ago. Like, hey, did you hear, this is what I heard at church. Would you mind if I send it to you? Or just giving you a good word, right? Because then I'm like softly planting the seed. And it's the same with the fitness stuff. Like, hey, would you like to go for a walk with me? Or like, hey, I'm eating this nutritious meal. It's really good. Would you like me to send you a recipe? Otherwise, if we're like, I'm going to give you all of it, I think that people become overwhelmed because we're asking them to change their life completely. And that's where you get the New Year's resolutioners at the gym where they're like, I'm going to start fresh. It's going to be a great year. I'm going to do all this stuff. And then they're fizzled out within the first month. And so when we're walking alongside people, being resource managers or disciples, the biggest thing that we can do is to slowly plant seeds and help them build a foundation.
Yeah. Well, and this also goes towards any type of level of leadership, right? Especially and I've spoke about it a few times, and I'm going to get into it more on the podcast, and that human element, when it comes to a workplace.
Yeah.
A lot of times, the missed opportunity is understanding the people that you surround yourself with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those missed opportunities is that understanding of how they operate, what their buy-in is, what drives them, what's their purpose, what makes them want to do it for themselves and for whatever the purpose is, right? That buy-in's so huge. And, I had an episode on it, and, it was L. David Marquette. He wrote the book, Turn the Ship Around. Great book. And he's a retired commander from the Navy, and he talked about, basic sense of you have a good boat, you have, not so good boat, or you have, a good team and not so good team, not in a sense that they're not good individuals.
Yeah.
If they don't have the tools, the resources, support, and the buy-in of the why, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we here? Why are we doing what we're doing? That's one of the big things that we ask ourselves so often than not. And it doesn't matter if we're in the military or not, the existence of the why, right? And so I actually bought this book. It's called Why. And when I was on vacation, I was intrigued by it because it's the existence of the universe and everything else.
Okay.
Right. And just how my mind goes. And, it's always intriguing to me to see how how other people think, right, of that existence and that why. Because when you're speaking to individuals, everybody receives it differently, right?
True.
Especially with what they may be going on in their own life.
Yeah.
Right? And the other thing is they may not be ready to receive that information.
Correct.
Right? Because they're creating those barriers themselves because their focus is not on self-improvement, it's surviving. Right?
Yes.
That's a huge thing. Yeah. That is a huge mindset thing. And when you get into mindset shifts, that's where the elements of well-being, are so important and not pouring everything into one, right? And the common misconception of if I have all the money, I can do all the things I need, right? Well, if you have all the money, but you have nobody to talk to, but you strive for connection, then your other elements of well-being are going to be sacrificed, and you're still not going to feel whole, right?
Yep. You're still going to be searching.
You're still going to be searching. That goes back to that transition out of the military, right? You go through line of service or policing or fire or any types of lines of service where there's a great impact, something bigger than yourself. And there's either camaraderie, there's a unifying feeling, right? And that identity is gone because you're not doing it anymore. It's still part of who you are, because it's built you and grew you over the years. However, that part is not there anymore. How do you refill it? And
fill in the gaps.
Fill in the gaps. And some of it's through being out in the community, connecting with other individuals, possibly doing something that you may have zero interest in and taking a chance,
Yeah.
right? And I found a lot of times that when I challenged myself, not because somebody said, "Hey, you got to try this," I challenged myself because I've never experienced it before. I found out that I had a better perception of an event or attending something than I previously thought. Because we automatically put emotions onto it of what we're going through in the moment, and
Hmm.
we say to ourselves, "That's not for me. I don't like that," so on and so forth.
Yeah.
One of the big things for me, yoga, right?
Yes.
So
Let's go.
I'm going to tell a brief story real quick of when I first got back. Actually, it was my R&R in between my deployment for Afghanistan.
Okay.
So my wife, fiance at the time, she she planned this spa trip. Go to the spa. What's the get your nails done on your feet,
Pedicure,
pedicure.
manicure.
Yeah, do all that stuff. Still feel bad for the person that had to touch my feet after deployment. There was
That's the worst
there
thing
was
to do.
yoga, right? That was my
Uh-huh.
first time ever trying yoga out.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
I didn't know you can't make noises,
you
when you're,
can.
I was like, downward dog. I was making
Yeah,
like cat noises and stuff, you know.
yeah.
So my experience was a little off because my perception of what it is
Uh-huh.
wasn't there. Fast forward to last year, I go down to Camp Southern Ground in Georgia.
Okay.
Camp Southern Ground is a beautiful nonprofit that Zach Brown put together.
Nice.
Connected with them, went down to see what they had. And we built a partnership with Veterans Rally Point. Well, they have this thing called DDP yoga that they introduced there. And that's up my alley, right? I get to make noises. I
Yeah.
can, I can flex, and make
Uh-huh.
noises and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, I can see myself, being an instructor in this.
Okay.
The point of it is it's not a matter of perception.
Mm-hmm.
It's the buy-in of interest in
Yeah.
doing something, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I said to myself, I got to keep trying different things. I got to
Yeah.
keep trying different things because I never know when that interest is going to turn into a hobby. It's going to turn into just like the podcasting, right?
Mm-hmm.
I grabbed the
Mm-hmm.
mic, grabbed the computer, whatever, and I'm like, I never knew where this is going to go. And look at it now; it's grown rapidly, and it's an outlet, and finding your outlet is one of those key pieces in transition.
Yeah, and timing. I think that
Yeah,
just because like you talked about the yoga it's like the timing and the place because I taught yoga pre-deployment and I had everybody from the people who couldn't get near their toes to the people who could, flex way past their toes. And we did have the groaners and the noise people in there. And so it's like if your only experience is that silent, quiet yoga and it wasn't for you, you won't try it again. And
right.
so I think that it's like the chapter of your life. Just because you didn't like something in the beginning chapter doesn't mean you won't like it later. And then also it's like the time and the place and the people who are in it. And so it's like retrying things
Yeah.
is great.
Well, one of the things, I'll dive a little bit deeper with it. And I think a lot of it is the mindset of finding peace,
Mm-hmm.
right? Finding peace in what I'm doing, rooting myself in something that allows me to be reflective, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't ready for it then, you
Yeah.
know,
True.
it may not be yoga. I probably won't, be signing up real quick for a yoga class, but it's finding reflection in my own way is the point of it, right? Yeah, I wasn't ready and I wasn't in that mindset because I was coming back from, in between a deployment and stuff. My mindset was a warrior mindset, get in there, do my thing, get
Yeah.
out,
Mm-hmm.
and that repetitive nature. And I think part of transition is part of that piece as well, is
Yeah.
where your mindset is, where you are at your life and your journey, getting out of the military,
Yeah.
and getting yourself starting that mindset shift sooner, right? Before you get out and understanding that, hey, you got to put your mindset in rear detachment, right? When you're
Mm-hmm.
about to transition out, not in the sense that I'm checking out, in a sense that, hey, let's reflect where I'm going to go, right? Where I've been, where I'm at, and where I'm going, and if the version of me talked to the version then, right, I would have had some choice words for myself and probably listened to myself a little bit more and been, a little bit better off.
Yeah.
But so one thing I got a few more questions, and when you see somebody struggling, whether they're serving now or you connect them after they're done with their service, what are some of the first steps that you've taken or others can take to be able to be there as a support network for them?
I think the biggest thing is just assessing where they are currently at and how you fit into it. Because with chaplaincy, one of the ways I consider it is like we're like a Band-Aid, and sometimes it's for excessive bleeding. Because usually I don't meet people just because they're having a great day, unless they just happen to stop by. Like if I have an office and we've already got an established relationship, but usually it's in a critical point. And so when you are in a critical point, realizing that you're meeting them sometimes at their worst. And so if you're meeting somebody at their worst, then you have to assess the situation as a big thing, and then figure out, like, do you have the capacity or the resources to be able to help them? And if you don't, trying to figure out what resources can you get immediately for them in your space. And so with helping like our current veterans that we have in Texas, I've worked a lot with Samaritan Center because they have counseling and they have peer-to-peer type counseling there. I had a friend that did that. And then they also have free acupuncture or like scaled acupuncture. So knowing the resources of your area is super important to be able to help people, especially if you're doing it as a peer, not as a chaplain, and not being afraid, because sometimes we're just so afraid to say the wrong thing. But a lot of the things that I say to people aren't from me anyway. It's like I'm assessing the situation, but I'm also reading into the room of like, what does God desire for this person? And how do I help in the way that he wants me or desires for me to do? So it's like, I'm currently like, I'll be praying in my head as I'm walking through suicidal ideation with somebody, because that's obviously like one of the most critical, but it can be somebody else that they just encountered a loss, or, they had a friend that unfortunately took their life. And so it's like just making sure that, one, like the only thing that we can really do wrong is to do nothing. Because sometimes like I've encountered people where they're like, well, I don't know enough to help them. But if you don't even try, then you've already failed. And so we need more people in the community. And I'm saying the community as in veterans, family members, anyone who knows anyone. We need all people to just not be afraid to ask, like, are you feeling okay? Or is there something I can do for you? And just being able to listen to them. Because a lot of times, if we just had provided just a seed of hope, we would not have a loss. But we are afraid to be uncomfortable, and we're afraid to step into somebody else's business. And so it's like we have to step gently, we have to step kindly and humbly when we do it. But we also have to do it without being afraid. And so that would be the biggest at this time, like the season that I've been in, is just encouraging people to really not be afraid to be an advocate for another person, or ask them how they're doing, and actually take the time to walk alongside somebody, even when it wasn't like, it's not usually in the convenience of your day, because usually you have a day and you're like, this is what my day is going to look like. And then there's a little surprise that happens, and there's somebody who needs you to walk alongside them. So being present in it. And I just taught last weekend, and I've been teaching a lot emotional intelligence for the soldiers that we have. And you talked about it earlier of, what a lot of the components of emotional intelligence, but the biggest thing is being present. We have a really hard time being present. Like, this is a long time for you and I to be present together, because usually you have these things right here. And so it's like the worst thing that you can do when someone's going through a hard time is this. Oh yeah, that's really, okay. Because when we do that, then you've closed the door. And so making sure that when you're present with somebody, you're listening and you're listening to receive, not to respond. And so it's just, if I was to sum it up, it's just be present and be a kind human. And that could change the entire atmosphere of everywhere you go. Because as veterans, as soldiers, as Christians, as all of the different titles that I could put on myself, the biggest thing that we can do to make an impact is to be present and care. And it can change the atmosphere for so many people we encounter.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of the big things too is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. You talked about it, and that goes for both sides of somebody, giving support and somebody looking to grow. It's uncomfortable when you don't know the end result.
Yep.
Right. And when you're in a growth stage, you're a little bit uncomfortable because, we want to be able to control the outcome. And sometimes the outcome is better than we expected, and sometimes we have to say to ourselves, you know what, it may not go our way, but that's a growth period to be able to then grow from that. So I would say to anybody, get comfortable being uncomfortable, and where there's support, seek support. We need to be better humans of knowing how to lead with nurture and care and be able to be there for each other, regardless of, belief, regardless of situation, regardless of, how it makes you feel. The most uncomfortable conversations I find are the most rewarding because you're able to understand another human even more. So I think that, when it comes to support, a lot of times we talk about, okay, we have to seek individuals. Sometimes people don't want to be found. Sometimes people have their own way to deal with things, and that's respectable.
Yep.
Right. But at the same time, both sides have to put in work. Both individuals have to meet somewhere in the middle, and want to be able to receive the support. And, you have to be willing to be able to provide the support, and it's a tough balance sometimes because you don't want to offend, you don't want to give too much support and, it come across as, you're trying to tell somebody how to live their life. Right.
Yep.
And that's where, the key thing, and you've said it multiple times, is walking alongside somebody. Right. Because when, think about this, you're on a playground when you're a kid and you're walking across the balance beam that's, maybe 3 inches off the ground. Right. And that person's walking that balance beam. You're walking next to them just in case they tip and you're ready to go like that. Right. That's, and that's what I'm saying. Metaphors are wonderful things because it's a relatable factor that we're able to apply in life and be able to use those tools. So, absolutely. Amanda, I want to say thank you again for coming on the show. Always some great wisdom and insight, and we always have great conversations. I feel like every single time we talk, it goes a little bit longer. We dive into a little bit more. Phoebe was a star of the show. Love everybody that was able to tune in. And, if you guys want to go check out Amanda, she is running for Miss Veteran America. Go check out links below. Thank you so much, Amanda. I appreciate you coming back on the show.
Yep, my pleasure. It was the highlight of my Sunday besides my nap. So,
thank you. I'm right up there with the nap. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, naps are important. Jesus rested. So,
yeah. And just remember, everybody, when that uniform call comes off, the mission continues. All right. The mission continues for you with growth and everybody else that you come in contact with. Find your purpose, find your why. It's so important for that transition coming out of service and being present for yourself and others. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Amanda, thanks again. We'll definitely have more conversations. And everybody go check out everlastingveteran.com if you want to send me a message to be able to talk about things that you have going on in your life. Amanda and I are going to have a couple co-hosting opportunities coming up. We're going to be bringing some guests on and everything. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you and everything you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. This is Ryan Landry, the host of the Everlasting Veteran Show, and I hope everybody has a great day.